Okay, let's unpack this. We are officially on the other side of the holiday peak.
We survive.
We survived.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
tree might be coming down. There's glitter everywhere. And for so many families, and probably for you listening, that transition back to, normal life is hitting hard.
Oh, it is. It's that post-holiday whiplash.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it shows up as meltdowns that feel way bigger than they should be. These power struggles that just leave everyone completely exhausted.
Hmm.
And just that general feeling that the wheels have,
Yeah.
well, they've just come off the wagon.
It's really the perfect storm of disruption. I mean, you combine the late nights, all the sugar, the sensory overload from family gatherings, and the complete collapse of the school schedule.
Right.
It all just chips away at the predictability that kids, especially sensitive kids, really need to feel safe.
So when that structure is gone, their anxiety spikes.
Exactly. And the tantrums, the defiance you're seeing, that's just a reflection of that internal overwhelm. It's not them being bad.
So our mission for this deep dive is custom tailored for this exact moment. We want to move past those vague New Year's resolutions like, be nicer or try harder.
Which never work.
They never work. Instead, we're focusing on building tangible skills that can lead to real change. We're diving into your sources on things like respectful parenting, collaborative problem solving, and the really foundational role of self-regulation.
And the core idea here, the premise we're working from, is that we can't just set rules. We have to establish the mindset and the skills for the whole family system to actually function, for the long term.
All framed by the principles of authoritative parenting.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start there. Section 1, recapping the chaos and really defining why we need anchors right now. We know the holiday whirlwind causes massive sensory disruption. So routines, they're not just things you do, they're stabilizing anchors. But what's the difference between just a routine and something, I guess, more powerful?
That is a crucial distinction. A routine is the schedule, right? We eat at 6, bedtime's at 8.
The logistics.
The logistics. But the sources show that what really, really matters are rituals. And rituals are basically routines that are infused with meaning. They have predictability. And that's what helps a child feel safe and connected.
And this is where it gets really interesting because your sources get into the social science behind these family rituals.
Yes, and the findings are they're actually pretty surprising. The research found that enacting family rituals, and they can be super simple things like a specific way you make dinner together,
Or a story you always read.
a specific story, exactly. That simple act is associated with greater enjoyment of the holiday, more intrinsic interest, and even higher levels of, get this, family liking.
Wow.
Family liking.
Yeah. And the key finding is that this link is more important than the type of ritual you do.
I find that so freeing. It's not about achieving some, Instagram perfect holiday craft.
Not at all.
It's about the reliable shared enactment, the consistency. It's the consistency and that shared emotional experience. That's what builds cohesion. For a family that's just struggling to get dinner on the table without a fight, the ritual could be as simple as, one person lights a candle before you eat.
A signal.
It's a signal that signals safety and connection. That predictability is the antidote to all that holiday overwhelm.
Okay, so if consistency is the goal, how do we use this knowledge right now to reduce all the stress that's still kind of lingering?
Well, prevention is key for next time. The sources say you should involve children in planning activities and traditions going forward. It gives them a sense of control.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe the most actionable thing for you, the listener, is collaborative planning before the disruption hits.
So not springing new rules on them when they're already completely maxed out.
Precisely. Start talking about expectations like screen time, chores, whatever, 2 to 3 weeks before the school break begins.
Give them time to process.
It allows for processing, for joint problem solving, instead of just issuing decrees when everyone's already fried.
So if that chaos needs an anchor, moving from there, we hit the next big challenge, which is understanding why the wheels came off. So let's get into section 2, which is, I think, maybe the biggest paradigm shift in modern parenting.
I agree. Reframing behavior.
Yeah.
This is where we introduce the core philosophy of collaborative problem solving, or CPS. And the belief is simple, but it is revolutionary. Kids do well if they can.
Which puts the entire burden of understanding on the adult.
It does.
So what does that actually look like
Mhm.
when my 4-year-old is screaming because his favorite blue cup is in the dishwasher?
Right. So that challenging behavior, the screaming, the refusal, it's a signal. It's a signal that the child is struggling with specific lagging skills, not that they are trying to manipulate you.
So in the blue cup scenario,
The child might be struggling with emotional regulation or frustration tolerance or, the flexibility to transition from one thought to another.
So it's a skill deficit, not a will deficit.
That's the phrase.
They aren't being lazy. They're not testing limits. They literally lack the neurocognitive skill to handle it.
Exactly. And that changes everything about how we approach discipline.
Because if it's a skill deficit, what happens when we use traditional methods like rewards or punishments?
Well, the research shows they often fail, especially for kids with challenging behavior, because they only address the symptom, the screaming, not the root cause.
A lack of flexibility.
Right. You can punish a kid for screaming, but that doesn't actually teach them how to handle the next time they're disappointed.
Okay, but that raises a question. If a child hits another child because they lack frustration tolerance, you still have to stop the hitting.
Of course.
So how do you hold that boundary without just using punishments that don't teach the skill?
That is the tightrope walk. The behavior is never the story, it's a clue. So your job is to address the behavior for safety. I won't let you hit, while you focus your real energy on figuring out the lagging skill.
And this all has to happen inside the authoritative parenting style, which is always linked to the best outcome.
It is. That's the container for all of this.
I know it's the gold standard, but let's make it practical. What does that balance of high warmth and clear limits actually look like day to day?
Okay, so an authoritarian parent might say, eat your broccoli because I said so, or you lose screen time.
Right. The dictator.
The dictator. A permissive parent might say, oh, you don't like broccoli. Fine, have some ice cream. The authoritative parent balances it.
How?
They'd say, I understand you don't like broccoli. That's the warmth and support. But we need to eat healthy food to make our bodies strong.
How?
We can choose to steam it or roast it, but it needs to be on your plate. That's the limit and structure.
So they're explaining their reasoning, they're listening, not just demanding compliance.
Exactly. And that balance is what's correlated with better life satisfaction, emotional well being, and really critically for school, enhanced executive functions. They're teaching their child how to negotiate, how to reason, and how to manage disappointment in a safe way.
Okay, so if the authoritative style is the structure and the mindset is seeing our kids as capable people with skill gaps, then our next section gives us the actual tools.
The compassionate tools, yeah. Let's talk about the cornerstone of respect.
Respectful parenting.
Whether you call it RIE, gentle, conscious parenting, it all starts with this one belief. You treat children, even infants, as important people. It means empathy, clear boundaries, and mutual respect from day one.
And a huge part of this, which conscious parenting really emphasizes, is parental self-awareness. If I want my kid to regulate, I have to regulate myself first.
Oh, absolutely. The parent has to manage their own reactions, recognize their own triggers. If you're getting louder than your child, you're not modeling regulation.
Or just modeling escalation.
You're teaching them that loud reactions are how you solve problems. So to handle their big feelings, we turn to a very specific tool, emotion coaching.
Okay, walk us through the Gottman steps for this, because it's more than just saying it's okay to be sad.
It's a deliberate process.
Yeah.
So step one, encourage expression. You just notice the feeling. I see you look really frustrated right now.
Step 2 is listen.
Listen carefully, full attention. Step 3 is repeat or rephrase it back to them. It sounds like you're really angry because the game didn't work.
And then step 4, the one where most of us get tripped up, validate the feeling.
This is the hard part. Because validation is not the same as agreement. You're not saying it's okay to throw the toy.
Right.
When a child is having big feelings, your role is to let them feel those feelings without immediately trying to rescue them and fix them.
So telling a kid you don't need to feel that way is actually really invalidating.
It's profoundly invalidating. You're basically telling them their internal reality is wrong.
So the magic is holding both things. You hold the boundary, I won't let you throw the toy,
Yeah.
but you don't try to change the feeling. I know you're so frustrated you feel like throwing it.
Yes, you are modeling that disappointment is tolerable. And once they feel seen, once that empathy is there, then you can move to problem solving.
Which is plan B from CPS.
Exactly, the functional application.
Okay, we need a concrete example. Let's use a kid who is always taking 20 minutes longer than their bedtime.
Okay, so you approach this as a collaboration, not a punishment. Step 1 is the empathy step. You want to figure out what's getting in their way. So you might say, hey, I've noticed you have a hard time getting to sleep before 8:30. I want to understand what's making it so difficult.
And the kid might say,
I feel rushed, or I'm scared I'll miss something, or my room is too dark. And you just listen. No judgment.
okay, then you switch. Step 2 is define adult concerns.
Correct. You calmly state your concerns. My concern is that when you stay up late, you're exhausted in the morning, and school is really hard, and you have a tough time on the bus. My job is to make sure you get the rest your brain needs.
And finally, the third step, the invitation step.
So we have a problem. You feel rushed and scared, and I need you to get enough sleep. Let's brainstorm some ideas that work for both of us.
And the key is that it has to be mutually satisfactory.
It has to be. Maybe the child suggests a dim nightlight, and you suggest starting the bedtime routine 5 minutes earlier. You're teaching them their concerns matter, and you're teaching them the skill of collaborative problem solving.
Which brings us all back to New Year's resolutions. So, what does this all mean? If we view the new year as a chance to build skills, then self regulation is the key resolution.
It is the master skill. Self regulation, controlling attention, managing impulses, handling anger. It's one of the most critical predictors of, well, everything: social, emotional, academic development. If you resolve to do one thing, resolve to build that.
So, how do we help our kids design a resolution that's actually skill based, not just a list of behaviors?
First, the goal has to be realistic, match to their age. A preschooler's goal isn't going to be mediate a conflict. It might be put my shoes away when I come inside.
Hmm. An older kid might read for 15 minutes.
Right. And second, you walk through the goal setting with them. You make it a plan B conversation, not a mandate from on high.
And when they're working on it, how do we give feedback without just saying, good job?
This is so critical. You praise the effort and the hard work, not the end product or their innate ability. So instead of you're so smart, you say, I saw you stick with that really hard problem. You almost gave up, but you kept trying.
Fostering a growth mindset.
Exactly. And you have to praise the baby steps along the way to keep them motivated.
Okay, let's get into the actual toolkit. What practical strategies can we use every day to build these self regulation skills?
Okay, first, movement. It is essential. Encourage physical activity at least 3 times a week. And to make it a regulation skill, you can use chalk or masking tape on the ground.
Oh, interesting.
Draw a line and have them walk on it, then hop, then run, then stop suddenly. The act of adjusting their speed and controlling their body is active practice in impulse control.
That's a great idea because it's play, it's not a chore. What about mindfulness?
It doesn't have to be, formal meditation for a kid. It's just about teaching them to create space between an impulse and an action.
Like blowing out birthday candles.
That's a perfect breathing exercise.
Yeah.
Or you can just describe the feeling of relaxing their muscles in really simple language. You're helping them notice the physical tension so they can interrupt the emotional impulse before it gets too big.
Okay, and finally, what about that moment when a meltdown feels like it's about to happen? The prevention toolkit.
For those high stress times, you need a sensory toolkit handy. This is about giving them grounding input. It could be silly putty, a weighted blanket over their shoulders, a mini trampoline,
A rocking chair.
a rocking chair, a cool washcloth on their neck. These are physiological supports to help their nervous system come back online when their cognitive skills have, checked out.
So, to summarize our deep dive,
Hmm.
we're moving past the holiday chaos by using these established evidence-based frameworks.
Mm-hmm.
We're using the firm but supportive structure of authoritative parenting,
Mm-hmm.
and we're filling it with the compassionate tools of emotion coaching and collaborative problem solving.
And the path to actually achieving resolutions isn't about imposing control. It's about connection and building those core skills.
And the foundational truth is,
The most impactful thing you can do for your child is to show up in a calm, regulated way yourself. Prioritize the relationship, validate their distress, say, I know this is hard, while also holding the boundary, and we still have to do it.
that focus on tolerating distress,
Hmm.
it leaves us with a final provocative thought. Research suggests that the more we focus on our kids' happiness, on always making them feel better,
The more we set them up for an adulthood of anxiety.
because they haven't learned that discomfort is survivable.
Hmm.
The real work, the real resolution, is helping your kid tolerate and work through distress, not just avoid it.
Mm.
So, what is one area this year where you can stop trying to rescue your child from discomfort and instead just confidently model that tolerance? Something to chew on as you start your new routine.